Hi there boys and girls, Brucey here with the next in my MS3 questions and answers and tips. They've had a couple of questions, one from YG and one from JG. I don't know if they're related, on my YouTube channel, and they've both asked, how do you use the parametric EQ on the MS3? So I'm going to take you through how it works, but also I've done a visual demo in Logic showing you the differences between parametric EQ and graphic EQs. Switching over to Logic now so I can give you a visual demonstration of what's happening with a parametric EQ and how it differs from a graphic EQ. So I'm just going to show you here an example of a graphic EQ, and this would be the Boss let me get their focus. Boss GE7. What we have here is an equalizer which has fixed octave frequency bands. So we've got 100, 200. What an octave is a doubling of frequency. So every time we double a frequency, we are moving an octave up. So if you play an A note on the low E string, you are playing something which is around 120 hertz, sorry, 110 hertz. Double that, you get to 220 hertz. Double that, you get to 440 hertz. So you can imagine here, this band 400, if we tune this up, we bring this up, we're actually boosting frequencies around or just around the A note. So that would be A flat, G, in terms of actual notes that we are playing. But don't think of it like this. We have to think of this as fixed frequencies with fixed bandwidth or fixed Q. So I'm going to jump back to Logic now and show you what I mean by these terms, and we'll see this in the guise of a parametric EQ. So now we are in Logic, and I will fire up an EQ here, and what we have here is a parametric EQ, and I'm going to turn everything off to begin with. Hopefully you can hear my guitar. As mentioned before, if I play an A, you'll see this is an A on the lower E string. You can see the fundamental frequency, which is around here. It's about 110 hertz. I'm now going up an octave. 220. 440, 880. And we can see here these are upper harmonics which give the tone of the guitar and everything its shape. Okay, so what a graphic EQ will do is, as we mentioned before, it is a fixed frequency. So I've set this here with a fixed bandwidth. So this is the bandwidth, this is the Q, so I can adjust this. But on a graphic equalizer, this value here will be fixed and this value here will be fixed. So if I go up to the next one and turn that on, we said it's going to be a doubling of frequency. So that doubled would be 200. It would be something like that. Now these are actually quite wide filters, so I'm just going to narrow these down a little bit so they're a little bit more realistic. Let's put that at 340 as well. Okay, and then of course I have another one, and that would be at 400. Yep, you're getting it right there, and I'll just increase that. So if I bring that up to the similar level, you can see how these different filter bands operate. So what am I talking about when I refer to some of these terms? So the Q factor, as you can see, if I click on this band, it's how wide the filter is. And the frequency is obviously the frequency value that I select it. Going back to the example, hopefully you're clear now. A graphic EQ has fixed frequency. These values are fixed, and they are fixed in octaves, and fixed bandwidths. Now, a parametric EQ is slightly different. A parametric EQ, let me turn these off, is just like this EQ here. I can change the frequency to any frequency I want, and I can also vary the Q, make it as wide and as narrow as I want. And obviously this has a different impact on the chords or whatever I'm playing.
quite narrow, like this, and I'm going to try and do this in real time. I'm going to play a chord and then just move it up and down. I get a wah-wah effect, because all a wah is basically a varying filter. We move the frequency with our foot. As I mentioned before with the GE7, for example, you know, if we think we want to use it as a solo boost, our solos are going to kind of be in this range here, so you might want to boost here. So it's helping us kind of poke across in the mix. And obviously with a graphic EQ there, you might have a doubling of frequency. So let me make that one. I'm going to make that there roughly. So this will be, the next one down will be 240. So that's what something like G7 would be doing. Turn it off for a second. When you're using a parametric EQ, then you have the ability to shape your sound more with fewer bands. You could go with a very wide Q factor, so quite wide. So you're boosting a whole range. So if we centered that about 2K, I'll turn this one off. That's going to boost all these frequencies here. So listen to the chords now. What we also have on the MS3 are a low pass and a high pass filter. And what a high pass filter does is it allows everything above this value to pass, and everything below it gets cut off by a certain amount. And you can vary the sharpness, although I don't think you can do that with Logic. It's a fixed drop off, roll off. And we have the same here. We have a high or a low pass, and everything above that goes. So remembering that the low E string on guitar is about 80 Hertz. We could filter out any kind of rubbish that's happening though below there, and kind of tighten up the low end of our guitar, because the bass guitar is going to start to come in here, so we're not getting such a bassy sound. Sounds good in kind of isolation, playing alone, but in a guitar mix with other instruments such as the bass drum and the bass guitar, which are also sitting around here, you can kind of keep yourself out of the way. Putting on the filter, or bring it down a little bit, make your guitar even brighter. Again, in isolation that might not work so well, but put it in the context of the mix and it will really make a difference. And it will make your guitar sound less muddy in a live environment, and also less muddy in a mix. High end, you can just roll off some of the high end brightness and sharpness, although I don't think you want to do that. You kind of want maybe a boost around here, something like that maybe. So there you go. I'm going to jump back now to the MS3.
Okay, welcome back. So let's have a look and how this relates to the items I've just been showing you within Logic. Hopefully you can see the screen there. Okay, so we're in our parametric EQ. We have a number of different pages. And very simply here, we have a simple gain control, controlling the low and the high gain, and an overall level control for the EQ, which you can cut and boost the overall level of everything. You could also do that in Logic. There was a little slider at the side which enabled you to do that. But let's move to the first page. So we have our lower mid frequency, and as we saw, we can change this frequency value to, we can move it across up until to 10k. So we can move the frequency value. We can also change the width of the cue here, and then we can change cut and boost exactly as we could do within Logic. Just think of those as the different bands within the EQ that I showed you. So we have another band here, which is the higher mids going up to 10k, and again you can adjust that all the way around. You've got the cue control here and the gain for cut and boost, and then finally you have the low cut and the high cut as we saw. So actually a very, very simple parametric EQ with only a couple of different parameters that you can change, unlike the one we saw in Logic where you have multiple bands that you can change. You only really have a high cut, a low cut, 2 bands, and this kind of low gain and high gain control here. Now this is different than the graphic EQ. So if we escape out of here and select the type to graphic EQ, and edit that. As you can see, we've got the little sliders here, which are very similar to what I showed you on the GE7, and we have fixed frequency bands here that we can cut and boost. So they have fixed frequencies, which are all octaves apart and an overall level. So how do you use, which one do you pick to use? Well, it depends on your overall needs. A graphic EQ is more useful if you want to boost whole bands of your frequency spectrum and your guitar, and say for example you just want to put a boost into a certain frequency range when you're playing within, say, higher strings, and you're in the high A section and you're playing around 880 hertz to 440 hertz, around there. For your solo, you could kick in a boost around those frequencies using a graphic EQ. Or you could actually go in and sculpt and be more precise. So I guess the main difference between the two is a graphic EQ is precise, but it is very limiting in what in terms of the fact that you have fixed Q filters and fixed frequencies. But it's good for general boosts over wider frequency spectrums. And the parametric EQ is more useful if you are trying to really sculpt a sound and be more precise with your EQing. I hope you found that useful. If you've got any more questions, please do let me know. I've been Brucey. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you later.